All right, y'all. So I got my microphone working. I think this is going to be a much better audio than the last video. Thank God. This month, I've got like 2 books that I know are going to cause a lot of problems. I know a lot of people are not going to like these reviews, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me. And I can't wait. Let's f***ing do it. Lost Prophet, The Life and Times of Bayard Rustin. This is one of my favorite books of all time because I was shocked at who this person was and the fact that I had never heard of them before reading this book. It's a fast book. It's, how many pages is this? It's like 500 pages. And every page is worth your time. It's also written by John D'Amelio, which I didn't realize until right now that that's an author that I read quite a bit. He does a lot of nonfiction books, I believe, about the queer community and people in the queer community. Bayard was the person that taught Martin Luther King Jr. a lot about how to protest, how to organize, and how to fight for civil rights. I know immediately people are going to be like, what the f***? Because a lot of people, as we should, love MLK and what he stood for and what he did for civil rights. Acknowledging that MLK learned a lot of what he knew and a lot of the things that he did from someone does not discount the things that MLK did. I need to make that pretty clear first and foremost. But the fact that we only know MLK and not Bayard Rustin is a huge travesty. Because why don't we know a lot about Bayard Rustin? Why isn't he taught in schools? Because he's gay. And that makes perfect sense because people want so bad to erase queer history when queer people are history. They are American history. They are the history of the world. We just don't hear about them because they've been erased so much. But this book changes that because it's a biography of Bayard Rustin, and it's a beautiful one at that. And it talks about all of his time with Martin Luther King Jr. and organizing the rallies and the marches, the March on Washington. And I've got just so much information I want to get into. I'm going to try to not have this video be like an explanation video of the contents of this. Does that make sense? I mean that I'm not trying to teach this book right now because this is a book review, so I should be reviewing the book. And I love the book. That's my review. It's well written. It's dense. It's a biography. It's a 500-page biography, so it is a little dense. But and it's like almost purely informative. There is definitely emotion in it because you're following someone's life. But the facts in this are great. I don't usually read like historical books, but this has got so much history tied in with it, and I love that it follows a specific person through history. So it's like on the backdrop of history, we're learning about Bayard's life, and I like that much more. I like connecting with a person much more than like reading about wars and things like that. History, the way it's presented, can be boring, but if you present it like this, following a person, connecting with a person, and having it be just emotional and factual really clicks with me. Bayard Rustin's whole thing was he was a follower of Gandhiism, which was peaceful protest and civil disobedience. Bayard was really great at organizing people. He was really great at organizing communities to do marches and to protest. Whereas Martin Luther King Jr., he wasn't great at the organizing. That man was an incredible speaker. He was the voice, and he was the forefront person. He was how do you say it? He was the face of the movement. That's the way to say that. So he was the face of the movement. But like most things, you don't see what's going on in the background. And Bayard Rustin was the background. He was like the right-hand man of Martin Luther King Jr. or vice versa. They complemented each other very well, and they were friends. Bayard handled a lot of the organization, or most of the organization, and actually taught Martin Luther King how to do peaceful protests, actively do civil disobedience, which is not being drafted in the war or something, or refusing to be drafted, things like of that nature, which Bayard went to jail for dodging the draft. While he was in prison, he created an education system for the prisoners. So they got books in there and taught a lot of educational classes. And I think that's super cool. That's super badass, to be honest. Bayard chose not to just die in a war and instead create education for those at home. And that's something I respect very much. Him being gay was not a secret. So 1943, his boyfriend would come to, I don't know what it was, like the meetings, but his boyfriend was coming to them, and it wasn't an issue. That's the crazy part. It wasn't an issue. 1940s. So that was really surprising to me to understand that his boyfriend was there with them, and people didn't care that he was gay. But what they did care about was how his homosexuality was going to affect the civil rights movement. This is why MLK and a lot of the other leaders never mentioned Bayard as being part of the movement, as part of being the Montgomery boycotts or any of that, because they feared that him being homosexual would be the target of the media rather than the fight for the civil rights. Which I don't know. There's so much to say about that, because at the same time, like, all the minority struggles are related because there's so much intersectionality. There's the issues of Black people. There's issues of queer people. You have to take into consideration the intersectionality that there are Black queer people. And that goes for a lot of other different minorities, women too, different races, different sexualities, different gender expressions. There's so much intersectionality. And to say we're only fighting for one right is to discount that very right and to discount everyone else. So to tie it into a modern issue, well, I guess this is still a modern issue, but to tie it into a more recent issue, with all this anti-trans legislation and gay people, queer people are not helping to fight with the trans people because the gay people are comfortable and have their rights. That's so fucking backwards, because none of us are free unless we're all free. And I know that sounds super cliche and cheesy, but it honestly, it's true. So you can't be for gay rights and not give a about trans people, because that is gay rights. That is all LGBTQ plus rights. It's all queer rights. This is my issue here at this time, is I can understand the argument like, we want to focus on civil rights issues, or, specifically desegregation of Black people and white people. I understand that argument, but I don't know. It's just, to me, it's up to be like, thank you for helping us, but you're gay, so we're not going to give you credit for the things that you've done because we're fighting a different issue. And it's like all those issues are tied together. And the sooner that we recognize that through education, the better off we will be, because we can all fight together to fight against the white, cis, hetero patriarchy. We all have a common enemy, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If they're against all of us and we band together, then who has the numbers? So what exactly did Bayard Rustin do for MLK? Bayard introduced King to a lot of labor leaders and social justice organizations. He also drafted a lot of King's speeches. I found that interesting because he's not often credited for that. I'm never gonna doubt MLK's oratory, because man, that guy could speak, and I've loved his speeches since I was a kid. As a writer now, like, he's just a big inspiration for me. So I'm definitely not saying, well, MLK didn't do his or he wasn't good at what he did. He did, or he was. But Bayard was also part of that. A lot of people were part of that. It doesn't just take one person. But to have someone to not get credit simply because of their sexuality is crazy to me. So here I am trying to give credit to one of my favorite people in history, Bayard Rustin. Bayard is a perfect example of how selfless a person can be in an activist role. MLK was going to cancel protests because their organization was threatened to expose Bayard's sexuality, which the media would take that and run with it, and it would overshadow everything else. So selfless as Bayard was, he decided to resign from the organization so that the protests wouldn't be canceled. He did that for the greater good, and that's hard to do. That not a lot of people would do that. especially nowadays. But he was a great man for doing that. I'm not sure if it was the right decision, but that's a big sacrifice that he made. And I respect that. I feel like I did exactly what I said I shouldn't do. I explained like the contents of the book rather than kind of reviewing what I thought of it. Anyways, yeah, I love this book. It's really well written. It's a little dense, but it's really important for anybody that, wants to pursue activism or queer studies. This is a great book. I understand if you're looking for a casual reading, this probably isn't going to be great because it is a thick one. Thick boy there. But yeah, overall, this is super important if you're interested in historical context. Yeah, historical queer activism, civil rights. This is excellent. The next book I'm going to review, Giovanni's Room, James Baldwin. I feel like I say my favorite to everything that I review on here, but I think he really is my favorite author. And I think it's not just for his books. It could be just for this book alone because I love it, and we'll get into that. But if you've ever listened to James Baldwin's interviews on YouTube, they're incredible. He is such a well-spoken author, and he was a little bit ahead of his time. He comments on a lot of things that we're seeing now still, unfortunately, and he's just a good man. I think the theme of this video, these book reviews, is intersectionality. The author of this book, and then Bayard Rustin previously, both Black gay men, and there's the intersectionality of being Black and gay and how that fits into American society. A lot of what this book is about. Actually, I shouldn't say that. That's not what the book is about. It's not what the story is about. It is the background of it. So this is a fictional book. James Baldwin, just a brief little history about him. Not a fan of the segregation and the discrimination against Black folks in America. Not a fan at all. So what did he do? He moved to Europe, specifically France, and I think even more specifically Paris. And that's where this book takes place. He found, in his personal life, more liberation there for being Black and gay. And he loved that a lot more than being here in America, which, how do you argue with them? But the interesting part about this book is that there are no Black people in it. It's full of queer people, it's full of gay people in France, but they're not Black. They're specifically white, and Baldwin has gone on to say that the reason he did this is because having those two issues at once, he kind of thought they would like overshadow each other, or it would be too much for the reader to dig into, having the main character be Black and gay. So they're white and gay. The discourse now has changed a lot, especially in education and in the LGBTQ plus community, where we need to recognize the intersectionality and we need to fight for both of those minorities that one might fit into. That's why James Baldwin focused on just the gayness in this book. If this was written in 2025, it certainly would have the intersectionality, because that's what we need a lot more of now, a lot more of the recognition of intersectionality, of having two minority identities at once and the differences that causes. Because what might work well for a white LGBTQ plus person may not work as well for a Black LGBTQ plus person. So getting into the story now. The story follows the protagonist as they are a young gay boy in Paris, learning kind of like the hierarchy of queer culture there, which at the time was a lot different than it is now. Actually, I don't think there is a hierarchy now. But then it was like, these poor young kids, gay kids, needed help getting around and needed help navigating the gay world and the world in general, because they didn't have their families. They were, kicked out or ran away or whatever it was. So they had to rely on like the elder queers, the elder gay men. But this book highlights that kind of in a darker way. I guess now they would be called daddies. Took care of these boys, paid for things, fed them, giving them places to live. One of the themes is kind of like you either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. It's kind of like that, where like, if you don't find a happy, healthy relationship, if you don't die in that, you will live long enough to be alone, creepy, and hating life, and never being able to find that kind of love, or never having the opportunity to again. So what the protagonist does, David, he he falls in love with another boy, Giovanni, and like the title, Giovanni's Room, the room kind of symbolizes like the secrecy of their relationship, or, you know, the self-hatred, the shame that David feels being in this relationship. Even though he's in love with this person, they're both in love with each other, and it's adorable. David has like social expectations of himself. Like, he can't allow himself to be gay. He feels too much guilt, and that guilt up the relationship. It really just messes up something happy. And I've got something really personal to say about that. I was in a relationship once. It only lasted like a month. We were dating, but I really liked this guy, and he really liked me. So it was working out, and we were happy, and it was great. He was one of those people that did that thing where he didn't like people that I followed on Instagram. Oh, why are you following that guy? Why are you following this guy? And I would hang out with my friends, and they're like, oh, why are you hanging out with your friends? Oh, is it romantic? Things like that. Like, he created problems when there weren't any problems. He was so used to people cheating, and I think he saw his parents cheat on each other and things like that. Like, it was a big trauma thing. So he didn't allow himself to be happy because he had never seen two queer people be happy together. So he just wasn't used to that, you know, and when we grow up not seeing that kind of representation, not seeing how queer people can be happy, or not seeing queer joy, we think that it's impossible to exist. We start creating problems where problems aren't. So instead of like being happy with me and us going on dates and doing that kind of stuff, it was always like, if we were apart for a few hours, he would be like, where were you? What were you doing? Did you cheat on me? And I'm like, what? Like, I was at the grocery store and then went to the library. Like, what the f-? Like, what? No, of course not. I never gave a reason, and he never gave me a reason to believe that he was cheating. So he just kept finding problems where problems didn't exist. And that's a lot like David did, or does in this book. What happens when you don't allow yourself to be happy is that you're not going to be happy. You know, you're getting in the way of your own happiness. You have everything. You have the person that you want to be with. You love them. You love the way they talk, the way they act, the way they are. But because you're listening to these outside influences, you know, that society gives us, like, oh, it's not okay to be gay, or it's not okay to be queer, or people cheat on each other all the time. You can't trust anyone. And that's what society is telling you. That's what your influences around you are telling you. Even if you don't actually believe that, you're going to start seeing that everywhere. You're going to think you start seeing that everywhere. I don't think this is a queer joy book. You know, this was before the most recent queer joy movement, where we realized, damn, all the gay characters get killed at the end. They're always tragedies. I can't remember if this is a tragedy at the end. No spoiler, because I don't fully remember the end. I've read this like 3 times and still don't remember. It's a great book about the problem with allowing society into your relationship. And that's something really important I think a lot of us could connect with and learn from. We listen too much to outside sources rather than our own relationship. There's this elder gay character in the book. He's kind of like the daddy to David, but in a more mentorship way. He warns him, don't f*** up the relationship, because you're going to end up like us older men who are lonely and just have to pay for relationships, basically, to the younger boys, not boys, but younger people. So here's a quote. Love him, said Jacques with vehemence. Love him and let him love you. Do you think anything else under heaven really matters? I think that's really deep within the context, because it's saying, don't f*** up your relationship. Like, you're in love. Don't f*** up your relationship based on something that doesn't exist, based on the stigma of society, based on something that you're listening to more than your relationship. Listen to the love that you have. Don't listen to the outside influences. I do think there's some problematic things about this. The way it depicts elder gay people is kind of in a negative light. They're warning so hard not to turn out like them. And I'm not sure if that's just because they're elderly and gay, or because they're elderly, gay, and lonely. I think it just kind of like stereotypes older gay people a little too much. That's one of my issues with it. That might be my only issue with this book. You know, we shouldn't be discriminating against old people like that, older gay people especially. I think that really captures what this book is about, because David's making this choice of, do I allow myself to love this person, or do I become lonely and think about this relationship for the rest of my life? And I highly suggest checking out and seeing what happens. The book is a very easy read. It's not a lot of pages. Let's see. It's like 150 pages. That's like nothing. And it's one of the most influential books of all time as far as queer publications. And I think James Baldwin is getting his flowers now a lot. He's getting a lot more recognition now, as he should. And the same thing with Bayard Rustin. Like, I think they're coming into the discourse a little bit more now, especially when we're talking about intersectionality. And I'm happy to see that. If you're enjoying these book reviews and the travel vlogs, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to get into more details, join the community on Discord or join the book club, check out my Patreon.